Holy plot! For such a seemingly chill chapter, the lore reveals are crazy. In one moment we are having a pillow fight, and in the next one we get more imaginary truancy of Quanta lore. This chapter was a roller coaster in the truest sense of the word. I initially thought that this will be just a transitional chapter where we just fool around and lay out the foundation of the next story arc, and that's pretty much how it was, to be honest. But we also got some lore revelations that answered some of my long-standing questions. The lore is flooring right now, and I feel like things are about to get a lot more crazier in the upcoming chapters. And you know what? I'm all here for it. Hello! In today's video we are going to take a deep dive into all the crazy lore revelations from chapter 10 of part 2. But before that, a word from our sponsor. If you are like me, you probably play multiple gacha games and of course HoYoverse games. If that's the case, allow me to introduce you to Eneba. Eneba is an online marketplace where you can top up in all your favorite HoYoverse games like Genshin Impact, Honkai Star Rail and Zenless Zone Zero. The process is very simple. All you have to do is make an account, access the game you want to top up in, select your server and in-game UID, and you're done! If things are still complicated, do not worry. Eneba has a step-by-step guide tailor-made for each game that lets you understand extremely easy how to top up. Also, for those of you worried that you might get in trouble or that you might be at any kind of risk, you can put your mind at ease. Eneba offers official distribution for their top-up services, so your account is safe. The platform has many reviews and a long-standing history in selling games with many offers on multiple platforms, so you don't have to worry. Eneba also has a loyalty program with many rewards for frequent Eneba users. So, don't miss out. Eneba is super fast, safe, and I've personally used it to top up in all the games I play. So, before you give in to the 50-50 guts, check out Eneba using the link in my description. It supports the channel and helps you get closer to C6ing your favorite character. Again, huge thanks to Eneba for sponsoring this video. This chapter truly came out of the left field and said, you want lore? Here's lore. So, a quick recap. In the last chapter, we skipped a couple of sectors and Dreamseeker finally got to face Leila. After a failed attempt from Leila to persuade Dreamseeker to go back, Dreamseeker absorbed a part of Leila's powers and got a new drip. And then we arrived in Defang, the first city on Mars established by Sinadina a long time ago. There we meet the goddess version of Sinadina, who is still alive at this point of time. We also meet other familiar faces like Naralab and a child version of Leila. Yes, we are in a timeline where she's not a freak with an unhealthy obsession for Sinadina. Okay, she still is, but she's a child here, so it's cute. From the very first moment we arrived in Defang, it was very obvious that there is more to this place, and to Sinadina. While she's still the kind and bubbly Sena that we all know, this version seems a lot more cunning than the Sinadina from the first chapters. And it makes sense. Here she's the goddess of this world after all, so she must be able to keep an eye out for her people. One thing that is clear is the fact that she's hiding something from us, and while she says that she doesn't know us, even trying to gaslight Dreamseeker into thinking that the Senna she knows is another person, it's clear that she is at least somewhat aware of who Dreamseeker is. First, when Dreamseeker tried to use her shadow powers, Senna took notice of that, but it brushed it off like it was nothing. Then she basically admitted that Dreamseeker looked like a grown-up version of Leila, hinting at the fact that she realized that there is a connection between these two. But at the same time, it's also clear that she is not the Sinadina the Dreamseeker knew. There are a few theories I have regarding who that Sena really is. She might be a similar being to Dreamseeker, but based on Sinadina instead, another digital lifeform created by another party to explore the Martian quantum computer. And it makes sense, since at the end of the day, this is a simulation. So, the current Sinadina is not the real one. Another thing that we learned this chapter, I mean, we learned it previously as well, but this chapter truly cemented that fact, is that dreams exist outside the confinements of time, meaning that it doesn't matter from which moment in time someone is from, they can still interact with others from the future or the past inside the dreams. The goddess we met in chapter 1 might be the real Sinadina before she died, who learned through dream-seeking the truth about Mars's future and tried to intervene by sending her own dream-seeker into the system from the past, which is the Senna that we first met. This is just speculation on my part, so take it with a grain of salt. There are also the strange flashbacks from chapter 3X between Dreamseeker and Senna, which make absolutely no sense right now, but they clearly imply that there's more between these two that we are not aware of right now. One thing that wasn't really explained last chapter is what happened to Leila, but we finally learned that Dreamseeker absorbed only a small part of her powers and that Leila simply allowed her to visit Defang because she's curious to see how far Dreamseeker can go by defying her will. Another very suspicious thing regarding Defang is that if you are paying attention to the NPCs in Osha, you probably realized very quickly that Defang and Osha share the same NPCs. And no, I'm not saying that HoYoverse got lazy and just reused assets. They also have the same names and everything, implying that they are basically the same people. And this is where we learn that the people in Osha who were thought to be born from the Sea of Data are actually people from different periods of time who fell into the Sea of Data and respawned in Osha without their memories. One thing that really bothered me last arc was how did Chen Shui live over 100 years? They explain it very clearly how people like the Seven Shoes or even Scudder can live a lot longer than normal people by using the power of the shadows. But as far as we knew, Chen Shui never really had them. So it didn't make any sense for her, who was born 100 years prior to when we first meet her in Osha, to still be alive. Well, now we know, at some point she fell into the Sea of Data and was transported into the future like the rest. And I am very glad that Hoyo addressed this, because to be honest, it was really bothering me and I already made peace with myself that we are never getting an explanation regarding this. But I was wrong. We also learned that Yun Yun, Dreamseeker and Chen Shui's mentor in Osha, is also from Defang. Since so many people from Defang fell into the Sea of Data, the cast speculates that something big is about to happen here that will cause them to fall in. We also learn that Mars exists in a state of imbalance between the imaginary tree and the Sea of Quanta, with the Sea of Quanta overtaking the imaginary tree, which causes the corruption of the Sea of Quanta that Mars faces. I never expected more lore about the conflict between the imaginary tree and the Sea of Quanta. We haven't got anything about that ever since Ado. I assume that when a world is in a balanced state, like Earth, it can exist on the imaginary tree without issues. But when the Sea of Quanta overtakes the imaginary tree, you get, well, Mars. And this also gives us a glimpse into how different worlds can be destroyed and fall into the Sea of Quanta in a way. We also learned that Sinadina used her divine powers to anchor Mars to a branch close to the Sea of Quanta, which allowed the civilization on Mars to grow and flourish, but it also created the sea of data in the process, which it seems to be a warped form of the sea of Quanta born from this constant tug of war between the tree and the sea. I cannot understate how big of a lore reveal this is, because it does not only explain why Mars was destroyed and why it was able to exist in this state, but it also shows us that each planet, even in the same solar system, can exist in a different tree/sea structure from one another. Now, let's talk about the other big revelation we got this chapter, and that is the fact that Sinadina met Kiana and Vita in a dream. This isn't really something new. We literally saw Sinadina and Kiana meet inside the dream just before part 2 started. But now we also have the added factor of Vita. And this explains another thing that wasn't previously known about the story, and that's Vita's involvement with Mars. It was hinted throughout the story that Vita has some connections with Mars, but that never made sense since, well, Vita was born way after Sinadina died and Mars was destroyed. But as we established that dreams exist outside the confinements of time, this makes a lot more sense now. One of the main things I want to get an explanation for in the next chapters is how the heck is the Cocoon of Finality involved in all of this? Dreamseeker remarks that from Coralie's account, Sinadina didn't have the authority of shadows while she was on Laquadar, so this means that this is a power she obtained after leaving her planet and after arriving on Mars. We also know that she was involved with the Cocoon of Finality somehow in the past, so like I theorized in some of my previous videos, the authority of shadows might be something she obtained after she interacted with the Cocoon of Finality, and it makes sense. The authority of shadow works very much like her powers. I assume that the dream Kiana is trapped in right now is also related to the Cocoon of Finality and Mars, and I hope that we will expand on that in the future, especially since Kiana sent a message last chapter to Rice Cake where she said that time is running out. What did she mean by that? I have no idea, but I am very excited to learn more about this in the future chapters. Also, Sparkle. Where the heck is Sparkle, Hoyo? And look, I am not giving this up. I will keep asking until they give us an answer. I don't believe that they just forgot about her after teasing future story events with her. There is just no way. In the first sector, we visited Mars, ravaged by the shadow calamity that was born from Leila's sorrow. At the end of the sector, we beat the Wheel of Shadow, an incarnation of the calamity itself that manifested after Baiji failed to harness the power of the Zodiac Astral Ring. In the second sector, we tackled the shadow calamity at its source, which is Leila, and prevented it from bringing Mars into the state that we saw in the first sector. And now this very much gives me final arc vibes. We are at the point where we might find out the origins of the authority of shadows and finally get ourselves involved with the Cocoon of Finality. Like I previously said, this really seems like the final story arc of Mars, and I'm curious to see how this will develop. It is important to note that Da Wei said that part 2 is the story of the solar system, so part 2 might not necessarily be over once we wrap things up on Mars. Now, it also might be over, I don't know, but I try to have a more open mind regardless of what Da Wei said. We might go to other places and uncover more mysteries regarding our solar system, maybe even incorporating the story of APHO into part 2 somehow, who knows. All I can say is that I'm very excited for the future of the story, but let me know what you thought about this chapter in the comments. If you enjoyed this video, leave a like, subscribe, and see you guys next time.